Hello. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace to people of goodwill. My name is Kevin Gregg. Welcome to I'd Rather Be a Buffalo. This is a show that is dedicated to helping you get through the storms of life with Christ's help, helping you deepen your relationship with God and discern what God's calling and mission is for your life. Hi. I did a stream the other morning. This one is recorded because I'm out and about on the morning, and I can't do a live stream, so I figured I'd do a recording for you. I did a live stream earlier this week, and I covered a lot of stuff. I was basically talking about the sanctity of life in all forms. I was talking about pre-birth. What happens if there's illness or terminal illness at the end of life and beyond life. A lot of stuff that I covered. In hindsight, after looking at that, I thought, man, that is a lot that I chewed off, and I don't think I did. I don't think I did it justice. So with that said, I thought, you know what? I'm going to take each of those subjects and I'm going to kind of break it down and expand on it. And listen, I'm not going to do this stuff perfectly, right? I mean, the biggest thing that's going on here is, the reason that I am doing this is I feel like I'm led towards a version of teaching, or catechesis, as they say in Catholicism. And I used to teach catechism to junior high school students for over 10 years at my parish, St. Charles, and I've been able to help out with sponsoring people in OCIA, which is the Order of Christian Initiation for Adults at St. Charles, as an assistant, helping people out, getting their sponsorship into the church. And so I'm continually learning as I go. But the biggest thing that's come up for me, which I mentioned on the live stream the other day, is that I think that some things are going on in the world. I think that there are a lot of people that are out there that may not be fully informed about what church and Christian teaching is. And so that's why I feel called to unpack this a little bit more. So what I'm going to do with that live stream that I was talking about, we're going to start briefly in this video talking about the church's teaching on life and how life starts at conception. So we'll go through that briefly. But before we do, there's a couple of things that I want to tell you. In order to support this channel, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. First and foremost, I'll just pull all this stuff up while I get it right here. Two ways that you can do it. One of the ways that you can help us here is to head on over to I'dRatherBeABuffalo.com. I'dRatherBeABuffalo.com. This is a memoir that I wrote with my friend Doug Riggle about his life, his coming to Christ, the challenges that he dealt with, including the the suicide of his adopted son, and how he was able to get through these storms of life with Christ's help. You can find that over at I'dRatherBeABuffalo.com. Challenging but also inspirational read. Doug was able to, we got this out after Doug had ended up getting stage 4 cancer and ended up passing away in October 2024. This show and everything that we do here is a continuation of that legacy of Doug's. So please support us over at I'dRatherBeABuffalo.com, where you can then click through and get the book over on Amazon. Also, the way that I was able to write this with Doug was using techniques that I use as a creative producer director. If you feel as if God is calling you to use your creative skills to bring work into the world that will help direct people to Him and His kingdom, head on over to Working Creatives. I'll have the link in the description below. This is over on the school platform. You can join the hundreds of people that are over there now that are getting their creative work done. Join us over at Working Creatives so you can do the work over there. So, life begins at conception. I actually have a slideshow that I've created for you that I'm going to get into, and I'm going to talk us through this. All right? And here's what this is. This is about person and soul that begins at conception. It's integrating science, philosophy, and theological anthropology. These are going to be 3 arguments that talk about where the church's position is on life starting at conception. And I'm going to go through each of these. Core claim of this is that the human person, which is body and soul together, comes into existence at the precise moment of conception. I'm going to show you how this is grounded in science, how it's rooted in philosophy, how there's some common arguments that try to argue about the actual being of the person when it comes into being, and how there's an argument for that. And then how this is all completed by theology. But first, we'll get into the biological foundation for this. The church believes this, that at the moment of syngamy, which is when sperm and egg connect, something genuinely new enters into reality. This is what it believes. The biological standpoint of it is the following. At that exact moment, when that syngamy happens, when sperm and egg connect, a unique human DNA is created at that moment, and it is distinct from both parents, all right? It may have elements of both parents, but it is also its own unique DNA chain that is created. Also, at that moment of conception, its own blood type is created. A child at that moment can be different from the mother's blood type, all right? And often its own sex, right? It has its own blood type and it has its own sex. And at that moment, there is an internal directive that is launched to start organizing its own growth and maturity and maturation, right? So this is set off at that biological moment where something unique happens, right? These two things, these two items, the sperm and the egg, have come together in this moment, in syngamy, at this moment. And all of these very, very unique moments happen, which are independent from the mother's body. So this organism is not an extension of the mother's body. It is a separate entity at that moment, chemically, biologically. Okay. Now, here's the continuity argument. All right. When you get into this, there is the continuity argument is a moral distinction that happens, a moral distinction about when a human being is present. All right. And the continuity argument goes to this: if you start to change when you're defining when a human being has come into being, when a person is a person, the moral line gets very blurry and it gets very arbitrary. And we're going to talk about three of those arguments that try to be made, that try to make a moral statement saying, well, actually, this is when it's a human being. And how if you move each of these arguments that somebody will try to put forward become very blurry, okay? For example, viability may be an argument. When is the pregnancy actually a viable pregnancy, right? This may happen in terms of where it's occurring within the mother, or things happening on that. But the issue that happens with this is that it also depends on technology, with what is used to find this. This has changed over time. So there have been people that have had different stages of pregnancy in the past and yet have still carried it to full term. These people that these women that carried the baby to full term, if technology that was used currently was also applied back then, it could have been discovered, oh my gosh, this person may have had what we could have deemed as an inviable pregnancy, and yet carried it all the way through. There have been many cases where a pregnancy has been described to a mother as like, it's not a viable pregnancy, it won't go to completion, being urged to abort the child. And when mothers have said no, that they have actually carried the child. The argument that is made is to go, well, it's not viable. If it's not viable, then therefore it's not a person, so therefore we must abort, right? And what happens with the viability thing is it's used as a term to say, well, it's not a viable pregnancy, therefore it's not really a person, right? But that has changed with technology over time. The other argument that's made is consciousness. Well, the fetus, which we'll get into in a moment, the fetus isn't conscious. It doesn't know what's going on. Therefore, it's not actually a human being. If you try to use consciousness as the argument as to whether a human being is alive or not, then that would also exclude infants who are born, because infants don't actually show a version of consciousness that they recognize who they are, what they're in, right? That they're a human being. And this would also exclude people that happen to be in a comatose state. People that are, this could be a fully grown human being, right? Human being who is fully alive and breathing, but is not conscious, right? Or cannot, like, tell us whether it's recognizing things or acknowledging things that happen. We wouldn't classify those two types of people as not being human. They are still human, even though they don't have consciousness. So you cannot use consciousness as an argument to describe whether the being inside the mother is a human being or not. Okay? Because if you try to apply consciousness, then that also applies to human beings that are actually in the world and are not showing that consciousness as well. And then also the other argument that happens is, well, it's not a human being until after it's born. Well, the thing is, it still is developing, growing, unique with what we saw with the biology. It's just that we're talking about location, right? We're talking about the location of where this being is. It's either, in the womb or it's outside of the womb, but it's still the same being that's happening, right? Just because you change the location of something does not all of a sudden mean, and this is the same thing as we see as babies, as babies get fuller in their stuff, even though they're inside the womb and haven't been delivered, in some cases, if a child is born prematurely, it's, it can survive outside the womb and it's still the same being that it is, right? That doesn't change it. The only one point that argues when a human being is present, the only point that is biologically precise, philosophically non-arbitrary, and morally consistent is conception. If you have it at conception and recognize this is when the human being happens, that is the one thing that holds all the way through, regardless of any of these things, whether it's a viable pregnancy, whether it is conscious, or whether it's inside the mother or not. It holds true at the point of conception that this is a human being. Then there's the theological dimension of this. The soul is the soul as completion, all right? Psychosomatic unity. I know that when you hear the word psychosomatic, you think like, oh, it's somebody that thinks that they're sick. Well, it's not necessarily that. Psychosomatic actually means body, mind, right? And in this case, what it means is that the human person is a body soul composite. What it is not, it's not the soul is not a ghost in the machine, all right? For example, it's not like, all right, the baby is, this would be the argument of someone that was, again, well, the fetus is just developing, and then, then when it's born, then that's when the soul enters it, and then it's alive, and then it's functioning. No, that's not the case. Matter of fact, what we describe in the Catholic Church is the fact that it is the animating form of the person. Once that syngamy has happened and that conception has happened, the soul has been created in that moment, and that is a driving force that causes that to happen. Direct creation. God directly creates a spiritual, immortal soul at the moment of conception, and that unborn child is not a potential person. They are a person at that moment with the potential to grow. So at that moment, sperm and egg united, person is there, person with the potential to grow. To take that life is to extinguish an existence that is intended for eternity. Here's a language problem that happens. And this has happened a lot, particularly in the late 20th century, going into the 21st century. Language. When we change what is, right? When we change the meaning of a word. This is morally resonant language that this is an unborn child, that this is a baby within inside the mother, that this is a human life. The clinical detachment that started happening, and this specifically happened with Roe versus Wade back in 1973 that legalized abortion in the United States. It was a ploy that happened in order to remove morally resonant language of an unborn child, baby, human life, and to turn it more technical, make it more technical and more detached, right? To say, well, it's not really a baby, it's a fetus, it's an embryo, it's pregnancy tissue, anything to dehumanize it. We have to be careful of this, particularly in the 21st century, and particularly with what's going on with the AI movement. This is an entire different thing. I am not anti-AI. I think that AI can be a perfect tool, but I'll tell you what I am against. I am against when the human dignity is diminished. And now all of a sudden, human beings are seen as just, we're just second-class entities, or, whatever, moving flesh robots as compared to the superior AI or whatever that is. That is a lessening, right? A lessening of the divinity of the human being, which God is putting on us, right? We have to recognize that His Son Jesus Christ came into the world, right? The divine came into the world in human form. Right? And He came in human form because He's showing us where it is that we are going to ultimately, which is what Jesus showed us after the resurrection. Perfect man, perfect body. The only thing that we'll have are the wounds from crucifixion, right? Piercing the side to show His love for us. But getting back to this clinical detachment that was used in the language, it's not a human life, it's a fetus, it's an embryo, it's a pregnancy tissue. The odd thing about it, which you see here on the slide, fetus is simply the Latin word for offspring or young one. It describes a stage of development, not a category of non-personhood. So whenever anybody says, well, it's just a fetus, well, the Latin word for fetus actually means offspring or young one. That's the actual technical term with it. And yet language has gotten corrupted to say, well, it actually describes, scientifically, it actually describes this stage of the embryos is growing, and again trying to detach the humanness from it. Two women, which I talked about one of these women the other day on the live stream, but I want to tell you that these are two women that are here that are recognized by the Catholic Church. These are two women that live their lives recognizing that who they were carrying, not what they were carrying. They both recognized that they were carrying human lives inside of them, and that they felt their duty as a mother that was protecting their unborn child, that they were going to do anything that they could to protect that child. The first one here on the left is Saint Gianna Beretta Mola. She was in the late 50s, early 60s. She chose, and she was actually a doctor. She was in the medical field. She chose the life of her unborn child over her own survival. Her choice was rational, and she saw clearly that the child in the womb possessed full, irreplaceable personhood. She ended up making sure that her child was going to be protected, even though she knew that it was going to cost her life. And the same thing happened for who the church has recognized as a servant of God. Here on the right, this is Chiara Corbella Petrio, who I talked about more fully the other day. She was faced with the same impossible choice. She was diagnosed with cancer, and she did not take cancer treatments. She acted on the same conviction. She wanted to make sure that her child was going to be born, and so she did not take treatments that would have caused injury to kill the child. And her son was born healthily, thank God. Her witness is not sentiment; it is logic made flesh. These are both two women that recognize, I'm carrying my child inside me, and my first duty that I have is to protect my child and to do whatever I can to bring this child into the world. Faith completing science. This is not a situation of faith being put on top of science or competing against it. It's actually faith completing science. Biology establishes uniqueness. Philosophy removes every arbitrary threshold, and theology names what biology can only gesture towards. This is a person. The biology, it's a unique organism at conception. Philosophy, it's a non-arbitrary alternative. Life happens at conception. You try to move that threshold, it doesn't take. There's arguments against it every stage. Conception is the only time where it makes sense. And then finally, theology. It is a person. This is a person that is made in the image of God that's being brought forth into the world. So that's a little bit of the extension that I wanted to argue with that, to just put forth part of that argument that happens with it being a human being inside the womb of the mother. It's a person. It is a person. It's not a thing. It's not a clump of cells. It's not pregnancy tissue. It's not a fetus. It is a human being that has existed at that moment. I think the strongest thing that is in that presentation is that at that moment of conception, this is a person with the potential to grow. Okay? This isn't something that's growing into the potential of being a human being. It already is a human being. It now has the potential to grow into more. So, there you go. That's a little bit of my talk down about life beginning at conception. And again, I'll unpack more of this as we go along. There's many different topics of this to unpack, but just felt led to talk about this. Specifically in light of what I said in the live stream the other day. This sort of came first and foremost because of the influencer couple that had received the diagnosis of their child having Down syndrome, and they made the decision to abort the child. Again, pray for that couple. Pray for their repentance, pray for their revelation. But I think that the big, and that child will be with God eternally. That is a human being that didn't have a choice in it. I'll unpack other issues revolving this in more depth on other live streams and other recordings. But I think that the biggest thing that moved me on this, why I want to be unpacking this, and particularly unpacking the sanctity of life and reaching out, is that I don't think that people know. They just don't know. I think that they have a false conception of well, it's not a human being yet or whatever. And we'll also unpack certain things of especially after the child is born, that there's a duty and responsibility. And yes, that might be something that I unpack a little bit more on my next live stream. The challenges that we are facing in society today, and why they're actually immoral challenges that families are facing from society, from parts of the economic system, from greed, from corruption, from things that happen that is causing that's causing the family to diminish and to not have more children being born in that. I think that I'll unpack that on the next. I'll actually make a note for myself on this. But that's definitely something to unpack, because there's more to this. Like I talked about a little bit on the live stream the other day, this isn't just about you got to have the baby and then leaving the mother or the family destitute as they're trying to figure that out. We also have a responsibility on the other side of that. I'll unpack that more in detail on another thing. But anyway, I want to thank you guys for listening. If this is your first time here, please make sure to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell for when I go live with a new stream, because I definitely want to get this word out. And the reason I'm doing this is this is deepening your relationship with God, because the more that you understand this, you understand what God created you for and to go towards. And also getting this information out to other people also entails getting through the storms of life that come up, because we are in a world that has a culture of death that does not want this. Satan wants nothing more than for the destruction of human beings, the destruction of unborn children, the destruction of families, the destruction of holy matrimony. He wants that destroyed. But it's our duty to be able to get that out there. So anyway, thanks for watching this video, and I will see you guys on the next one. God bless you. Bye-bye.